When you think of Japan, what comes to mind? Maybe it's those peaceful temples or super modern cities, right? But what if I told you that deep beneath all of that, there's this incredible, fiery power that has literally built the entire nation from the ground up? This is so much more than a geology lesson. It's really a story about how a people have learned to live and actually thrive right alongside one of nature's most powerful forces.
Welcome to the Japan Deep Dive Report. Together, we're going to explore how this landscape, defined by both awesome creation and terrifying destruction, has forged a culture that's just unlike any other. So to kick things off, let's start with a single number that really puts everything into perspective.
111. That's how many active volcanoes are packed into the Japanese islands. Now, to give you some scale, there are about 1,500 active volcanoes on the entire planet. Japan has over 7% of them. I mean, that is just incredible. It makes it without a doubt one of the most geologically dynamic places you could possibly live.
So you see a number like that, and you've got to ask the big question, right? Is all this volcanic power a terrible curse, this constant threat just waiting to erupt? Or is it actually a blessing, the very thing that's provided the raw materials for life and culture to grow? Well, as we're about to find out, the answer is a really complicated and, honestly, a fascinating yes to both.
Okay, to really get this duality, we need to get our heads around the basic science of how Japan even came to be. I'm not exaggerating when I say its very existence is a direct result of this massive geological power. It is, quite literally, a nation forged by fire.
The number one reason for all this intense activity comes down to one simple word: location. Japan is sitting smack dab on the Pacific Ring of Fire. Think of it like a giant, super-active seam on the Earth's crust, where massive tectonic plates are constantly crashing into and grinding against each other. It's the planet's epicenter for earthquakes and eruptions, and the Japanese islands? They're basically the peaks of huge underwater mountain ranges that got shoved up by these incredible forces.
And in Japan, there's a great name for this process, Kazan Fronto, which translates to the volcanic front. You can literally picture it as the geological front line. It's this specific line running alongside the deep ocean trenches, where one tectonic plate is being forced to dive underneath another. That process, called subduction, generates so much heat that it melts rock deep underground, creating the magma that then rises up to form that iconic chain of volcanoes that we see all across Japan's landscape.
So, if you're living with this kind of raw power, you have to try to understand it, right? But what's really interesting is that our scientific understanding of volcanoes has changed. It's changed dramatically, and it's forced a complete rethink of how we look at risk and even time itself. For the longest time, we kind of put volcanoes into three neat little boxes: active, dormant, or extinct. Seemed logical, you know? But as we learned more, we realized those labels weren't just wrong, they were dangerously misleading. The Japanese terms kyukazan for dormant and shikazan for extinct, they imply a sense of finality that just doesn't exist in geology. A volcano's never really dead. It might just be sleeping on a timescale that's way, way longer than a human life.
And the moment that really hammered this home was in 1979 with Mount Ontake. See, before that, everyone thought it was extinct. It was just a peaceful mountain, a great spot for a hike, and then it erupted. It was a massive shock, a huge wake-up call that proved our human sense of time is just a blip in geological time. The definition had to change. So today, a volcano is called active if it's erupted any time in the last 10,000 years, or if it's showing any signs of life at all, like geothermal heat.
But here's the thing. Despite all that obvious danger, the people of Japan haven't just been surviving next to these fiery giants. No, they've developed this deep, ancient relationship with them, a kind of symbiosis that goes back thousands of years, right to the dawn of civilization there. It's this constant duality, this two-faced nature that really defines life in Japan. For every single danger, and they are terrifying, the eruptions, the ashfall, the earthquakes, there's this amazing blessing on the other side. That same volcanic ash creates incredibly fertile soil. The mountains store and release huge amounts of life-giving fresh water, and the rock itself provides essential materials for building.
And this relationship goes way, way back. I'm talking about the Jomon period, one of Japan's earliest cultures. They were already using what you could call the volcanic gift shop. They made razor-sharp tools out of obsidian. That's a volcanic glass. They figured out how to farm the rich soil made from layers of ash. And then, much later, you had samurai lords building these massive, unbeatable castle walls out of something called welded tuff, a super strong rock that's literally fused together by volcanic heat.
Okay, now let's get to maybe the most famous and culturally important gift to come from Japan's fiery heart:
It's something that's become a huge source of relaxation, of community, and even a form of spiritualism.
Over 3,000. Just let that number sink in. That's how many hot spring areas known as onsen are dotted all across the country. And this incredible number of natural hot springs is a direct gift from the very same underground heat that powers the volcanoes. Basically, groundwater seeps down, gets superheated, and then bubbles back up to the surface as these perfect, mineral-rich hot baths.
Now, it's really important for us to get this right. An onsen is not just a hot tub, not at all. It's a completely natural spring, heated by the earth itself. The water is full of minerals that are believed to have all sorts of healing properties, which is why onsen are so central to Japanese culture. They're places to relax, to socialize, and just to connect with nature.
And this connection is ancient. I mean, they found traces of people using onsen way back in Jomon period ruins. There's even a myth from an 8th century text that tells a story about one god healing another sick god using the magic of hot spring water. So for centuries, long before modern medicine, onsen were these vital places for therapy. It just shows how deeply they're woven into the health and soul of the nation.
So all this incredible heat boiling up from underground isn't just for bathing. It represents a huge, and I mean huge, source of clean energy. So that brings us to the modern day. How is Japan trying to tap into this incredible geothermal power for its future?
Well, you might think this is a new idea, but no. Japan has actually been experimenting with geothermal energy for over 100 years. The very first experimental vent was drilled way back in 1919 in Beppu, a super famous onsen town, and the first real commercial power plant started running in 1966. Japan was a true pioneer in this tech.
So, given that long history and all that raw potential just sitting there, you would think geothermal energy would be a massive part of Japan's energy supply, right? Well, here's the shocking reality. As of 2010, geothermal power made up just 0.2% of the country's electricity, a tiny, tiny fraction. Which of course leads to the big question, why? The answer really comes down to a modern-day conflict. For one thing, a lot of the best spots for geothermal plants are inside protected national parks. But the real roadblock, the biggest challenge, comes from the onsen communities themselves. They have this very real fear that large-scale drilling could mess with or even drain the natural hot springs that are the absolute lifeblood of their culture and their local economies. It's a classic dilemma, the push for clean energy, running straight into the need to protect a priceless cultural treasure.
And all of this brings us right back to where we started, back to that central question of whether volcanoes are a curse or a blessing. The story of Japan is really the story of living in a constant, delicate balance between these two powerful realities.
When you get right down to it, Japan's identity is completely inseparable from this dynamic. It's not just about getting through the next disaster. It's about a deep, ongoing negotiation with the very forces that both create and destroy the land they live on. From their oldest myths and samurai castles all the way to today's energy debates, the volcano is always there, shaping the conversation and shaping the future.
Which leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Maybe this constant awareness of how fragile things are, this endless cycle of destruction and renewal, maybe it isn't a flaw in the landscape. Maybe it's the very source of Japan's resilience and its character. Could it be that this intimate, dangerous, and yet life-giving dance with the forces of the earth is the true soul of Japan? It's something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.